Hello, my name is Aaron Edwards, co-founder and market consultant of Santos Springs. We offer grain marketing solutions to producers in multiple countries. Welcome to our W2H grain marketing channel. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button. I also recommend tapping the bell so you get future notifications. And if you like what you see, hit the like and share this video with other farmers who care deeply about their grain marketing. If you are a corn or soybean farmer, your revenue depends not only on your production, but also the answer to three simple questions: when, how much, and how you sell. One W, when, two H's, how and how much. Our W2H mentorship provides a clear, concise, and custom approach to answering each one of these three questions for your specific farm throughout the year. Before we start this week's content, it's always important to remember that trading in futures products entails significant risk of loss, which must be understood prior to trading and may not be appropriate for all investors. This commentary and the information contained within should be considered market commentary and reflect the opinions of the author. For those of you watching this with a delay, if you are a U.S. corn or soybean farmer and want to stop being held hostage by market uncertainty, let us teach you how to place each one of your bushels in a grain marketing strategy specifically designed to optimize your farm's revenue. Click on the link and we'll work together to see if our W2H mentorship is the right next step for your grain marketing. My name's Aaron Edwards with Santos Springs. Today is September 24th, 2025. I know a lot of you guys are getting started with harvest in the field. Be safe. Hope all goes well with this year's harvest. It's nice to have a big crop. I think most guys are having a big crop. Hopefully we can get a little something out of the markets. And next week we will turn the page, go kind of get set on our new year's new crop year, right? So old crop becomes new crop and so on and so forth. We'll make that transition next week, first week in October. Before we do, let's get into the recommendations before we get into the analysis. And the recommendation this week is going to be the same as last week: optional long corn positions. The reason it's optional is because if you follow the corn recommendations, theoretically we have all of our new crop done and all of our everything that needed to be on a basis contract is on a basis contract, and we're not locking in the futures against December just yet on those, so we don't have any work to get done on corn. That being said, it's my experience, and from talking to a lot of guys, that maybe there's some overrun bushels, maybe a few more bushels are going to be harvested than what was expected, and I think there's some extra bushels out there. So if you have questions, go back and watch last week's video. I kind of lay out the plan, but basically the extra sales, what I mean, the optional is if you have these extra overrun bushels that aren't fitting into your portfolio because you had extra bushels, right? So that would be the optional reownership. It has to be tied to a strategy. I described it kind of in more detail last week. We'll look at a chart as to why it's kind of, it's a bit of a coin toss if you should be stepping into longs here or later. But I think getting started, if that's going to be part of your strategy, getting a horse in the race, getting started on that makes some sense. Let's jump in. Probably the biggest headline and what's gotten the most attention is the news out of Argentina. Let me go ahead and let me talk a little bit about it first, and then I'll show the meal chart and we'll get into it. So in a nutshell, all right, let me break it down. This might be old news to some of you, but Argentina has a tax on their soybean and soy meal export. A significant amount of Argentina's soybeans are crushed, so they are actually a big exporter of meal. They raise a significant amount of soybeans. They actually import some soybeans, and then they crush a lot of it, and they export soybeans, but they also export a lot of meal. This week, a big headline that broke was that for 1 month, or up to $7 billion of exports, the Argentinian government is waiving the export tax. There's basically a 20 for soybeans and soy meal. I think it comes out to 24.5% of like an export tax. It's a little different on some other agricultural goods, but so just rounding numbers, a quarter of the soy exports out of Argentina have a tax on them, and that's going to be waived up to 7%. And I think for corn it might be 26%. Don't quote me on it, but the export tax is waived, which has made Argentina's exports that much more competitive. But it's only temporary. It's till the end of October or until they book $7 billion worth of sales, exports. So now let me share the chart on that. And that's for both old and new crop. All right, so I'm sharing the chart. Let me get a marker here. Let's do green. Green, there we go. So this is soybean meal. This is the nearby contract on the Board of Trade, soybean meal. So when that news broke, this is what we saw. We saw a big drop. Boom, meal just took a nosedive down. Good news, in my opinion, good news, is that we still actually haven't taken out the low that we had back in August. And even though it dropped, if we were to think of kind of a value area or price range where we've traded a fair share, that would catch a lot of it. And we're still kind of within that. So yes, meal is at a low price, one of the lowest, but it's not horrible. That's the first thing. Between old crop and new crop, about 20% of that is old crop, which for them would be like through November is considered old crop. January, they start getting some new crop. And about 20% is new crop. The initial impact, what we've seen kind of from a market standpoint, we'll get to the beans in just a little bit, but what we've seen from a market standpoint is soybeans took it in the chin, meal took it in the chin, really pressured markets. Corn mainly sideways. So the soy complex got hit a lot harder. Corn not so much, but they haven't fallen, both soybean meal and soybeans, they haven't fallen as low as they were on the recent fall. We also saw a hit to basis, both in the US and Brazil, but the US basis hit is very much in line with the seasonal, so I'm even hesitant to attribute that to the Argentinian exports. We did see a hit in like Paraguay and in Brazil in their basis, where that came down a little bit. But there's kind of two ways to look at this. Number one, oh no, we're losing demand to Argentina. Number two is to just see how fast there have been bookings and how, just how much demand there has been for soybeans. So for the South American market, which I know is not the central concern here, what we've seen is basically buyers in Brazil and Paraguay are just pulling out of the market, say, okay, let's just let the dust settle. Let's see how much demand there is. And the demand is going to Argentina. So we've seen kind of a freezing up, a drop in basis. I personally think that's likely temporary because I think a lot of that demand will come back. But the other thing is, it's not like that you gave a discount and people flooded the stores. It's not like there's no demand out there. There is a lot of demand out there. And so now we'll jump into the analysis part. Before we do, everything we do based on a portfolio, we lay out what makes sense on your operation and seasonals, funds, technicals. We'll get into that in just a minute. And that gives us the call to action. This week, there's no new call to action. We've handled our work on the beans. We've got our corn on basis contracts. The only thing that I already mentioned was optional re-ownership of corn if you have some overrun bushels. I think that makes sense. If you have questions or you would actually like to adjust that in your portfolio, just reach out and we can go over that. And now we'll jump into the corn analysis and the beans analysis and go from there. So we're going to start here with soybeans and then we'll move over to corn. Let me share the screen here and get a marker. Marker blue. There we go. All right. So this is the net position of funds, and I've almost been joking about them. So they're at zero, but they've been, they're a tiny little bit long. Last week, I almost want to go color by color. Last week they were short, and then 2 weeks before that they were long, and then about 4 weeks before that they were short. You could just tell we've just been going back and forth on these positions. The funds really can't make up their mind on whether they want to be long or short. We've just been going a little bit long, a little bit short, a little bit long, a little bit short. And what that looks like on a chart, unsurprisingly, is kind of this boring sideways trade. If you want to look at the bulk of the trade has really been, this is January soybeans. So if we mark 1020 here, and then we go up to say 1080, and that's even a little thin, but that catches the bulk of the trade right there. That's the bulk of the trade. There's been a couple of outliers, and we could probably even make it shorter, but if you would just say 1020 is, anything below that on the January contract has been a buy, and anything at the upper end of that range so far has been a sell. Over here in June is where we got a lot of work done here at the end of June. That's been a sell. We're actually towards the lower end, but there's kind of another way to look at this that's maybe even a little bit more optimistic, which is basically to just say, let's just draw, that got sloppy. Let's make this black. Let's just draw a line through the bottom of this market. See if we make that straight. And you could tell that it's kind of sloping upwards. And then if you take these highs, around 280 has been a point where we've had pretty significant resistance. Where is this market heading? And we really don't know. Nobody has a crystal ball. But with pretty bearish news and harvest, we're still at, honestly, right in the middle of the range. Right in the middle of the range here, even though we should have quite a bit of bearish news. So we do have bearish news and we're still in the middle of the range. I'm cautiously optimistic. I think that we're getting more and more comfortable at the upper end of this range. And I think there's a decent shot that this market's gonna give us some upside here. And I think we're probably gonna come back up over 1040, 1050. I think that's the more likely shift in this market. All the same, we've gotten our work done. Don't need to get anything done on selling on quarter 4 soybeans just yet. We got a little bit of time on that, so I think we just wait. And then shifting gears to corn. Let me get the marker here. Let's do green. Corn has the speculators have steadily reduced their net short position, and they're gradually building up. They're gradually stepping back from their net short position. So they're not long yet, but they're a little less convinced that they want to be bearish, so to speak. What that looks like on a chart, and this is where we get into the optional reownership. So we have this 20-day moving average. So far it's held. And if that holds, we would likely continue doing that. And then we have this 200-day moving average coming down. It would be very normal trade for us to basically ping pong back and forth until we come into some type of wedge in the mid, 430 or the mid fours. And then time will tell if we burst through the top of that or if we go down. The reason that I'm not overly bullish is because we don't know, could harvest pressure bring us down here to test these lows again? And it absolutely could. How much corn is going to get sold? Just kind of a panic sale at harvest. My fear is that we have one more big sell-off in this corn market before we could say, okay, we've got firm floors for harvest and we can start getting optimistic. Hopefully we don't get it, And from a re-ownership strategy, Aaron, you're recommending optional re-ownership here on overrun bushels. And the way I'm thinking about it is, let's say that you re-own 50% of whatever you're going to re-own, right? These optional purchases, overrun bushels. It's not in my portfolio. I'm not sure what to do with it, but I got an extra however many, bushels. So let's say you re-own 50%. If we go up and you can pick up 10, 15 cents, okay, that helps. You liquidate it here. If the market comes down, then you get the other 50% here. Your average buy-in is somewhere close to 410, and then maybe we rally up to 420 or 430 from there, from above your average buy-in. You still pick up, on average, maybe 15, 20 cents from your average buy-in. So I would not go overboard, but getting started on it makes some sense. This is where I would start an average. Think about it, starting an average, not going all in, we're going to the moon. But that's, in a nutshell, that's what I would recommend, or at least that you consider this week. Now let's just summarize it all. I know you guys are busy in the field, so there's some important headlines that we went over, and we'll just bring the summary and keep it short and sweet so you guys can stay focused on the field. Seasonally, it is a buy for corn. It is a buy for soybeans seasonally. Managed money is sold in the corn market, but technically they're neutral. And they're a tiny bit long in the bean market, but technically they're neutral. Corn is in a very shy, but it is in an uptrend. Beans are in a downtrend as of this headline out of Argentina. Basis levels are approaching historical seasonal lows. We may still have some selling pressure that makes basis a little worse, but we are likely close to the lows. The corn market is holding support at the 20-day moving average. But I am not convinced it won't take one more swing down on harvest selling pressure and test the August lows. The soybean market has lost support and traded down hard on news out of Argentina. However, I believe this will likely be short-lived, and we will see recovery in the soybean market. A major factor that could impact the soybean market is South American growing season, right? They're getting ready to plant. So, okay, there's this friendly exports out of Argentina, which are hurting Brazil and US exports, but, that's limited to October. And if we start getting planting delays and whatnot, we could have some issues. So far, there's no story on planting delays, but most years we have some hiccups. Hope you have a great rest of your day, rest of your week. Let me know if you have any questions. Be safe during harvest.